Well, hello, Internet. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jessica Ingold, and I'm the author of several books for young and new adult readers. We are back in lockdown here in Ontario, so I thought I would take this as an opportunity to brush up on my video editing skills and also treat you guys to a very short, informal reading of the first chapter of the first book in my series. Right now, I'm working on revising the third book, so I thought this would be a good time for me to introduce you to the characters in the story if you're not already familiar with them. So, today's reading will be the very first chapter of the very first book in my series called Fate Unwritten. And I don't really want to tell you too much about what goes on here, but it's very appropriate for people who felt like their lives didn't really turn out the way they expected. So I do hope you'll enjoy this, and I hope perhaps you'll consider reading the rest of the story, and I further hope that you will consider reading the entire series when it's eventually published. So, without further ado, I will now read the very first chapter to you guys. Chapter 1, right there. Here we go. The woody aroma of pine bark laced the cool morning air. 18-year-old Hannah Lowry breathed in the mountains around her and looked between her horse's ears for the next jump, which appeared on the horizon disguised as a dense cluster of trees and bushes. She squinted, but couldn't see the pond her trainer had warned lay on the other side. She leaned forward in the saddle. Despite the early hour, the sky was the brightest shade of blue she'd ever seen, bluer than the dozens of first-place ribbons adorning her bedroom wall back home. Hi, have you come to hear the reading? Gotta love cats, always interrupting you at the worst possible time. As she adjusted her reins, she tried to clear her mind of every thought but one. If she did well in the preliminaries this year, then she was guaranteed a shot at nationals. After that, it was only a hop, skip, and a jump to the Olympics. Hop, skip, jump. The horse's strides echoed her thoughts as sunlight rippled in the water below. A moment later, it splashed her in the face. Hannah rode toward the trees. Towering western hemlocks and stout green junipers appeared to wave at her as she cantered past, thankful she would soon be able to change out of her wet breeches. If only going home didn't also mean going to school. Not that she minded terribly, especially since there were less than 2 months until summer vacation. After that, it was off to university, and university meant doing whatever she wanted, including moving in with her boyfriend Cameron. As Hannah neared the end of the course, she tried to imagine what he was doing in this moment. Sleeping, probably. Poor Cameron, Hannah thought as she collected her reins, slowing her sweaty horse to a trot, then a walk. If he didn't get some coffee soon, he might sleep right through to graduation. Hannah approached the muddy white pickup truck parked under the trees. The driver's door had been propped open to allow fresh air into the cabin. A lanky woman with dark green pants and a gray sweater sat behind the wheel, paging through a stack of papers as thick as a phone book. She smiled as Hannah pulled on the reins, stopping the thoroughbred a short distance from the trailer. She dismounted smoothly, running a hand appreciatively along the gelding's neck before lifting his halter off the saddle stand and liberating the bit from his whiskered mouth. Muriel Sandy, the woman who apparently read phone books for fun, and who also happened to be Hannah's trainer, stepped out of the truck, a portable coffee mug clutched tightly in her hand. "How did he do?" she asked, as Hannah loosened the cinch. In response, her horse sighed with relief before stretching out his neck to investigate Muriel's pockets. "Great," Hannah replied, removing her helmet. "He didn't even flinch at the water. At this point, he shouldn't flinch at anything." Muriel slipped her hand into the pocket of her sweater and offered the horse a plain white mint. "I looked into those boots you wanted. The girl on the phone said they have a pair in your size, but you should still go to the store and try them on." "I have to work tonight, but maybe Cam and I can take a trip up to Barrier this weekend," Hannah said, unable to keep herself from smiling. It wasn't just that the town featured a high-end tack store. It was also one of the few places where she and Cameron were allowed to be alone together outside of school. They usually made a trip out of it, which included buying lunch, but perhaps this time she could convince him to stay a little longer, and maybe even take her to that jewelry store she'd seen online. Her parents would never approve of that kind of frivolity at home. All of her wages, and a good portion of theirs, were expected to go toward her horse. Muriel smirked knowingly. "He's working this weekend. I already checked his schedule." Hannah rolled her eyes. University couldn't come soon enough. As she removed her saddle, the passenger door opened and Cameron stumbled out, still half asleep. He wore a red t-shirt with the popular rock band logo on the front and his favorite black and white Converse sneakers. Or had he left his favorite ones at home? Either way, he wasn't exactly dressed for the occasion. Cameron wrinkled his nose, suddenly wide awake. Ah, crap, he muttered. Mud? Hannah asked as ribbons of steam rose from a horse's hide, the animal's heat mixing with the chilly air. She snapped the lead rope on his halter and led him toward the nearest shady patch to cool down. No, I mean actual, literal horse crap. Over there. He pointed to the passenger side of the truck, but really he could have been pointing anywhere. You owe me new shoes. Turning her attention back to her horse, Hannah smiled and said, You didn't have to come, you know. She serpentined through the tall trees, pausing to allow the thoroughbred to nibble on some grass. Cameron rubbed the back of his neck. I wanted to, he said, drawing out his bowels as he yawned. Besides, I had to finish studying for my Spanish test. Does this mean you weren't sleeping? Hannah asked, amazed. He smirked. What do you think I meant by studying? Glancing over his shoulder to ensure Muriel wasn't looking, Cameron wrapped his arms around Hannah's waist and pressed his lips softly against hers. She kissed him back just as gently, wanting the moment to last. That is, until she saw Muriel watching them out of the corner of her eye. Hannah pulled away reluctantly, straightening her shirt as his hands returned to his pockets. So I've been thinking, Cameron started as Hannah coaxed her horse away from a clump of unidentifiable weeds. We should probably start looking at apartments soon. If by we you mean you, me, Muriel, and my parents, then I agree. His face fell. Why can't it just be the two of us? You know why, she murmured, making brief eye contact with Muriel across the stand of trees. Your mom won't even let us watch movies in your room with the door closed, much less hunt for an apartment in a city that's 6 hours away. She's not my mom, he grumbled, technically. She's still in charge of your life, at least until June. Let me talk to her. Maybe I can work out some kind of compromise, like you and I can go look at apartments, but I have to call her 20 times a day. Like that's any better. Hannah patted the horse's coat. He felt cooler already. Meanwhile, her lack of freedom had made her feverish with frustration. Why couldn't their families see that they weren't in junior high school anymore? Before the conversation could continue, Muriel wandered over to where they were standing. She checked her watch for the 1,000th time that morning, then glanced over at Hannah's horse looking mildly impatient. Is he cool yet? She asked. Almost, Hannah answered, stifling her annoyance. I'll keep walking him. Her trainer shifted her focus to Cameron. Could you give me a hand with the trailer, please? I need help putting everything away. I guess, he replied. When Muriel scowled, he quickly amended his answer. Yes, ma'am. Anything for you, old guardian of mine. That's more like it, Muriel addressed Hannah once more. I'll be in the truck if you need me. After she was gone, Cameron turned to her with a reassuring smile. We'll talk more at school, he promised. Sure, if I can pry you away from your friends. Lately, it seemed like everyone was trying to interfere with their relationship. Cameron smirked, backing away slowly. 2 more months, he said, holding up the equivalent number of fingers. Then I'm all yours. Right. Part 2 of Chapter 1. Cameron cracked open the musty old Spanish textbook and tried to remember where he'd left off. It was all starting to look the same now, so close to the end of the year. Why was he even taking Spanish anyway? Oh, right, to make himself more marketable, or something like that. He turned the page, going over the words again in his head. Beside him, Muriel sighed. That won't do, she muttered, staring at the cell phone screen. Cameron abandoned his reading, thankful for the distraction. Did the Canucks lose again, he wondered. Hannah's training schedule. It overlapped with another student's. A smile crept across Cameron's face as his eyes returned to the book. Oh well, he thought, pretending to be fascinated by his homework. A scheduling conflict could only mean one thing. More time for them to spend together. If only Muriel trusted him enough to let them stay home alone. I suppose I could always cancel her lesson, Muriel started to say. Cameron's ears perked expectantly. A very different part of his body seemed to experience a similar sensation. You could, I mean, it's only fair to the other student, he said, grinning like an idiot. A lucky idiot, he thought, picturing Hannah. The luckiest idiot in the world. And he was about to get luckier, assuming he didn't completely blow it right then and there. Muriel narrowed her eyes as if reading his mind. In the ensuing silence, Cameron gained a few mind-reading superpowers of his own. Yep, he thought to himself, you blew it. Nice try, Muriel said after a long pause. I think perhaps I'll put Hannah to work on cleaning the stalls that day. We could do it in a stall, Cameron's brain butted in, kicking his Spanish conversion to the curb. The barn was private enough, right? Hell, at this point he'd settled for the little room above the arena where Hannah's horse friends sat around drinking fancy coffee and gossiping. That ought to give them something to talk about. Yes, I think I'll do that, Muriel said, killing Cameron's hopes stone dead. If I have time afterwards, maybe we'll squeeze in a quick lesson. Does Hannah even want to go to the Olympics? He asked, glancing at his girlfriend's house. After ditching the horse and trailer at the stable where Muriel worked, the three of them had driven back to Hannah's place so she could shower and pick up her stuff. For some reason, this part always seemed to take the longest. What makes you think she doesn't? Muriel inquired, lowering her phone. Did she say something to you? Cameron shrugged. I don't know. I just wondered. Muriel frowned. Okay, so maybe Hannah didn't actually say she was tired of riding, but even Cameron had to admit that she seemed different these days, less enthusiastic. When he'd met her 5 years ago, all she ever talked about was horses. Then, as they got older, it was horses and makeup. Then just makeup. Now she had a new obsession, university. In her parents' world, university meant school and a high-paying career. In his world, it meant never having to wait for a scheduling conflict to be alone together. Funny how the same word could mean different things to different people. But what did Olympics mean to Hannah? By the way, Muriel began, capturing Cameron's attention, I overheard you talking about apartments earlier. If you think Andrew and Jeanette are going to let you and Hannah disappear for a few days, then you can think again. Cameron rolled his eyes. Andrew and Jeanette were Hannah's parents, and they made all the rules. Muriel merely enforced them. Andrew was a stockbroker and had his own firm. Jeanette was a lawyer specializing in family law. The Lowrys were good people, but they worked too much. Though, to be fair, a horse was still a pretty sweet trade-off. Still, they hadn't exactly jumped for joy when Hannah started dating. Or maybe they were just pissed that she was dating him, Cameron thought, fuming. After all, it wasn't his fault that his father was in jail, or that he'd been passed around the system when CPS discovered his mother was a druggie. By the time he met Muriel, he'd had 6 different foster families, and most of them were shit. But not Muriel. She wanted kids, even throwaways like him. Hannah said it was fate that had brought them together, but Cameron didn't believe in all that cosmic mumbo-jumbo. In his mind, he was just lucky. The luckiest idiot alive. As he thought this, the front door opened and Hannah appeared, a backpack slung over her left shoulder. She trotted down the steps, a shy smile breaking across her face as she walked toward them. 2 months, Cameron told himself as she slipped into the passenger seat behind him. That was all that stood between him and forever with her. Thanks for waiting, Hannah said as Muriel pulled away from the curb and rumbled down the street. Of course, Muriel replied as Cameron returned a Spanish textbook to his backpack. Hannah turned her focus over to him. I'm surprised you're still awake. So am I, he confessed, twisting in the seat to look at her. She smelled like coconut and had her hair partly braided down one side. A light dusting of color, midnight sky or morning dew or something like that, shimmered on her eyelids. In this moment, only one thought ran through Cameron's mind. Someday he was going to marry this girl. Then he would officially be the luckiest married idiot in the world. Ready for your Spanish test? Hannah asked, though she already knew the answer. Cameron never studied for anything, though he still managed to get decent grades. See, he quipped, overly pleased with himself. Even his accent wasn't half bad. Hannah raised her brow. Is that the only word you know? See, Cameron repeated, with considerably less gusto this time. He sighed resignedly. I'm going to bomb this test, aren't I? She rolled her eyes toward the window and smiled. If being unable to speak Spanish was Cameron's greatest deficiency, then she might just be the luckiest girl in the world. That was Chapter 1 of Fate Unwritten. I hope you enjoyed it. In the meantime, I'm going to continue working on Book 3. So, as I said, if you are interested in reading the rest of Fate Unwritten, I will post a link down below, and you can go and either purchase the paperback copy or it's also available on Kindle, Kobo, all those places that ebooks are sold. Anyway, guys, I know things are crazy right now, but just hang in there, and eventually we will get through all of this, one day at a time. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, please stay safe, and I will see you when I see you. Take care.